All right. So we are back with Joe after the Tour de France. Again, appreciate you taking the time. Just got back to your house, I guess.
Yep.
You look sick. Is there anything you need to tell us?
I am sick. Uh, no, I actually did a test this morning for just an antigen test and was positive. So uh, I don't know if this, I don't know exactly when it started, obviously, but the last week of the tour, I started to get kind of like a cough, phlegm, blocked nose. Um, the the test on the last rest day was obviously negative. But then the doctor sent us home with the test, and I did it and was positive. So, to be honest, I would not be surprised if there were a lot of those in the peloton by the end of the race or guys getting home. Obviously, like there were a number of guys that went home early in the last few days of the tour, but just my observation of the number of guys kind of coughing and sneezing and whatever, whether it was COVID or whatever else, like obviously the last week of a grand tour is kind of prime for upper respiratory illnesses.
Yeah. Is there anyone in the peloton that just like pours sweat that you don't want to ride behind? I know there are a couple local
the,
guys that are like that.
the only person I didn't want to ride behind that I noticed in this tour was the I think it was the last mountain stage that Adam Yates kind of like lost a huge chunk of time. And there was at one point when I was like sitting right behind him on the second climb of the day, and he was really like hacking all over the place. And I was just thinking like either I need to get well behind this guy or ahead of him or to the side. But I'm like I'm a prime target right now.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
so I mean, I'm sure. Obviously, I'm not a doctor, but I'm sure that the proximity in which we ride next to each other and like breathing hard and snotting everywhere and teammates carrying bottles and jerseys and whatever, like
Oh
I'm
yeah.
even though you're outside, I'm sure it's like a prime, also combined with the fact that like we have suppressed immune systems at that point in the race, I'm sure it's like prime for COVID wildfire.
Yeah. And I'll stop again. I didn't introduce. We got Eric Griffin with us again, but I had to start off with a joke. So Eric, thanks for joining us today.
Happy to be here.
So Joe, I mean, your first tour, I'm super stoked that you completed it. Obviously, tons of people didn't. We saw guys dropping out, even like I don't know, Mike Woods dropped out last day or 2 days to go, something like that, because
Yeah,
he had a positive. So congrats for finishing it.
thanks.
Was it as easy as it looked from my couch?
As easy as it looked, yes. No, actually, it was interesting in that maybe more so than any grand tour I've done, there was not any easy days aside from Denmark. And then obviously the last time trial is easy or hard as you want to make it. But I don't know exactly why, but I noticed other people comment. I suspect that perhaps you noticed it was not a great tour for like pure sprinters. Um, there just wasn't that many opportunities on offer in terms of like it's totally flat. All the sprinters teams are going to pull, and it's 99% sure we're going to have a bunch sprint. And when it's like that, there's less guys that are going to be motivated to go in the breakaway, right? But there was a lot of these stages that were like maybe a climb a little bit too close to the finish, or like the finish was a little bit too much of a climb in the end, or for whatever reason, it was like not as suited to being a pure sprint stage, which kind of opens the breakaway door and makes for aggressive racing. And another thing which I heard Gilbert comment on, which it sounds ridiculous, but actually I think it was true, is we seem to have a disproportionate amount of tailwind.
I thought so too. I mean, it just, obviously I was a spectator, but like every day I would hear the commentators, mention a fast tailwind and the super high speed. It was the second fastest.
Fastest ever.
I think the
Oh,
fastest
yeah,
tour ever,
the
Almost
fastest
and,
tour.
and by a
43
decent margin,
Yeah.
because it was like
43
by half a
kilometers
K an
per
hour.
hour.
Yeah,
Yep.
and I remember where I had got second from. It was the second hottest Grand Tour ever.
Yes.
There was only like one hotter, which was Spain, I guess.
Yeah. So, yeah, I noticed all of those things. The racing was generally fast. Like if I compare to the Giro earlier in the year, I would say the Giro, I felt that the Giro was harder than the Tour physically. But I felt that the Giro had days that were definitely harder than the hardest days of the Tour, but also days that were definitely easier than the easiest days of the Tour. Like, as to say, there was more variety. Whereas the Tour, it was like every day was fast. In general, I would say it's a bit more nervous or stressed in the bunch, just because I think the Tour is always like that. And also there may be an element of like, we had some really hard mountain stages, but none of them were that long. I mean, Hodicom was what, like 3 hours 45 or something. It's like,
Yep.
it's so you didn't have any of these days like you'll have in the Giro sometimes, where it's like 6 hours of like a real slugfest. And the heat was also a major factor. Probably contributed to a little bit less. I noticed people commenting on, there were some days in the mountains, the numbers were not like anything, super impressive, like across the bunch. But when it's that hot, it's that's also a major factor.
Oh yeah. Did you take any bottles from spectators at all to dump on your body?
So I take bottles from spectators to dump, but I never drink them.
Yeah.
And if it's an unopened like can of Coke, then I'll drink it. But I'm sure it's like super, super unlikely that anything would ever happen. But like, you just never know what could be on. I mean, in general, like food, drink, whatever. It's like, you just want to be careful with that. I mean, I think like even the evolution of now everyone has a team chef that is always with the team, and a lot of that now is like complemented by nutritionists who work with the chef, and everything's programmed for our days. But I believe that actually started like in part also as like a food safety thing, because if you think about it, it's like if you were relying on the hotels or whoever to kind of source your food, it's like, given the stringent, like anti-doping side of things that we're subject to, it's like, again, it's probably super unlikely, but you don't know.
It definitely would be an easy way to sabotage. So I could totally see wanting to have a lot of control over that.
Right. And you can never control everything, but if you can mitigate any like unnecessary risk, then it's worth doing.
Sure.
So talk a little bit about the final day, the ride into Paris. I was watching it, of course, on TV, and as a callback to something Jared said on one of the earlier ones, do you think Gustav could have kept up? I think I could have kept up in the beginning.
I think everyone could have kept up.
Yeah, that looked like an exceptionally slow coffee shop ride for a while. But at what point then does it kick up? Is it all the way? It doesn't until you hit the chomps, or does it kick up a little bit before that? And then talk a little bit of just that feeling rolling in past the Louvre and then into the main thing.
It starts out super slow, which every Grand Tour I've ever done that has had not finished with a time trial is like that. I mean, like at one point I looked down at my Garmin and I had like 85 watts average. So really, really slow. And then basically as soon as we hit the circuit, well, actually before, I would say about 10 Ks before, we started kind of, it wasn't hard, but you could feel that like we were going a bit fast. And then as soon as we hit the circuit, the first couple laps were fast, but then like a small breakaway was established. And it's not easy, but I think part of that is just like the switching on, because I mean, I was super tired. I was like wrecked that morning. Probably now in hindsight, like starting to kind of develop COVID. Also, it's like stage 21 of the Tour de France, but you know, doing the Tour de France with COVID is certainly not
And you had
really
the transfer. I mean, you have
transfer.
Yeah, that
the last
morning.
2 days is a lot, like just a lot going on.
Yeah. So it was super hard to get going. I think also just to switch on mentally. But then the laps actually went pretty quick. You do 8 laps. The most notable thing I would say is like you don't even really see on TV that it's cobbles, but I would say the majority of the circuit is cobbles, and it's pretty rough. So
They used to give the gutter too, and I think they cut the gutter out, right?
Yeah.
I couldn't see anyone using the gutter, and there was nothing apparent to me. So I think they moved the barriers more like tightly in. But overall, I have to say, like our friend Justin and his fiance Elizabeth were there, and my wife Melissa was there, and we were just talking after the race because we got a hotel pretty close to Place de la Concorde where the buses are parked. And it's like, I couldn't imagine anything else that you would literally be able to like ride through the Louvre, past the pyramid, do laps around the Arc de Triomphe, like you're shutting down. It might be the most iconic like stretch of monuments in a city anywhere in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, we're going to close this down for a bike race.
I've seen the like before and after footage of cars, right? Like this is not a lightly traveled area. This is a heavily traveled car road, and then boom, they shut it down. Boom, it's just this beautiful, like you said, iconic thing of sport. And even more so, they've moved the start back right now, so it finishes later. So you actually, the sun is starting to come down, so the lighting is better. And by the time they do the podium, you basically are at sunset.
Yeah, it's pretty. I've done. This will be I've started 12 Grand Tours, finished 11, and I've finished them in all sorts of different places. One of my favorite actually was like, it was not nice to ride because it was also cobbles and like super rough, but one Giro we finished and did laps around the Colosseum in Rome, which also was amazing. But it's, I don't know, there's something special about like kind of, I remember also we did, kind of started in town and then went out and came back into town after like 60K. And there's that first time as you're coming into the city, you see like the top of the Eiffel Tower, and it's just cool. I mean, it's like something that I guess from the perspective of when you look back on your kind of cycling career and like things that you wanted to do, maybe performance wise, but also just like as an experience, it's definitely, I think, one of the coolest things as a cyclist you can do is like, race on the Champs-Élysées the last day of the Tour de France.
I mean, forever now, years from now, whenever it comes up, oh yeah, I was a pro cyclist. Oh, you mean like the guys that ride the Tour de France? Yes, exactly like that. Right. I did that.
Yeah,
exactly.
So what did you do after the stage?
So we actually went to the Kazakh embassy, which is basically right at the Arc de Triomphe. They hosted like a buffet in the garden behind, had some sort of traditional Kazakh food, hung out. It was a mix of like the team, management, sponsors, and some people from, the embassy, like, I guess, sort of heads of state type people.
Now, I imagine a really subdued Kazakh embassy. It's very, it was rustic.
No, it was. I mean, it's a beautiful building. Like,
I know. I'm being sarcastic. I bet it's outrageous.
Yeah.
I mean, you sent us those pictures, and again, it's back to like Paris. You're talking about hundreds of year old buildings, just beautiful, beautiful scenery. Yeah.
Yeah, it was cool. And then we went to kind of super fancy hotel after, had a drink, went to our hotel, and then yesterday we just spent kind of touring around Paris, just hanging out, and got back to Nice today.
Nice.
So
Touring around Paris. So do they have like city bikes? Did you ride bikes
yeah,
around?
they've got Lime. Maybe
Yeah.
I think they have Lime in the
Scooters.
US.
Yeah, they
Yeah,
have bikes and scooters in DC.
yeah. So they've got Lime. I didn't use the scooters. I'm a little bit like afraid of them.
They're terrifying. They are.
Yeah, and I don't think they jive well with cobbles. So we stuck to the city bikes, but they're pretty cool. It's like, not too expensive and kind of a fun way to get around. And it's cool, like because I see this in Nice. The mayor here is like a big cycling fan. He brought the tour to Nice and has put in a ton of cycling infrastructure. And I think they're a little bit like in competition, Paris and Nice, for like the kind of greenification and bike infrastructure. And a lot of the major streets they're losing their real estate for cars and gaining for kind of pedestrian, bicycle, sort of city shared mobility type use, which I think it's amazing. So
Did I hear that the tour might be ending in Nice in a year or two?
yes, I I actually read today that it might be confirmed. It's I think strongly likely, and it may have been confirmed, but they say 2024 because Paris gets the Olympics. And I don't know if it's a logistics or a security thing, but they say the tour should finish in Nice 2024, and I believe Florence for the start, which also would be very cool.
Yeah. So you're going to have to do the tour and the Olympics in 2024. It's going to be a big year.
Yeah. Why not?
And just like finish
it would be
at home.
I have
At
no
home,
idea what the
right?
last stage would be in Nice because typically it's like kind of the last stage is a parade, right? Unless they made a time trial, but it's like there's not really any flat here. It's all pretty much like you have the city and then like it's straight into the mountains. So it'll be interesting how they would construct that.
Maybe like a crit.
Yeah, possibly.
I was half joking, but that that makes a lot of sense though with the Olympics. I guess the logistics, traditionally the Olympics are pretty much right after the tour. It would probably be difficult to and maybe kind of boring to hold two stages that finish kind of in the same place. You know what I mean? By a stage of the tour and then the Olympic road race. Presumably we would probably utilize that finish, I would think. So
yeah, exactly.
Well, I have to jump off. You guys can probably keep going. But one question for the cycling nerds, and then I'll bow out, right? The data nerds, right? You and I were talking a little bit about, back to the comparison of the tours, the TSS and the kilojoules and that sort of thing. And, I'm sure you'll look at more data later, but it's fascinating and something interesting to look at when you think of the speed of this one versus like the Giro you did earlier, but then also the actual workload and that sort of thing. And it's a little early, but what is your feeling in terms of the comparison between the two, the demands of the two? Is it the of course the terrain, but also just the I think you already alluded to it, the nature of the tour, just the hype and whatever. Is it more demanding overall?
So I would say if we look at kilojoules as like kind of just general work, I think the Giro was a little bit higher. I think also the TSS was a little bit higher. However, they were loaded differently. Like the last week of the tour, the second week was more demanding than the last week in the tour. In the Giro, it's the opposite. And traditionally, the Giro's last week is like really stout. To me, I felt the Giro was harder, even though we had some more variety in terms of like super hard and then super easy days. Part of that could be like I was talking with our team doctor about this, and this is what he theorized was like, I didn't feel that my condition was as good in the Tour as the Giro. I mean, I wasn't riding as well in the Tour as I was in the Giro. And he thought like there's also, it's potentially like you couldn't go as like deep in the Tour as you did in the Giro. I don't know if that's
because you weren't
true.
fully recovered from the Giro.
Perhaps, yes. So that could be an element. Also, I guess another thing about the Tour, which isn't really quantified via a power file, is while some, like a stage on paper might look easier numerically, like let's say like what your power was on the day, it was also a lot hotter in the Tour. It was a unseasonably warm Giro. It was probably the hottest Giro I've ever done, but the Tour was even hotter, which makes it harder relative, like for the same sort of numbers. And then the other thing I would say is that Grand Tours always get kind of less and less stressful as they go on, as guys get more fatigued. But in general, I would say that the mental stress of the Tour was higher. I think just because people always use the word nervous in the bunch, but like it's one of those things that you can't really measure or you can't even really know until you've like experienced it. But kind of like that whole aspect of like the gaps between everyone, like as we ride, are closer, and like guys wait to break later and guys take more risk, and there's a little bit that kind of elevated sense of stress, which again, that's not something that is like power into the pedals and we can measure as easily as watts. But I know that for me, for sure, if there's like risk of crosswind or crashes or whatever, like fighting for position in the bunch, while it's not always about like pedaling, it definitely is mentally draining, which I'm sure also contributes to fatigue over time.
Well, I'm glad we could contribute to that like extra level of stress.
Yeah.
In your 12th Grand Tour, we're like
on the rest day, no less.
Take some time out of your rest day to do more work.
Yeah.
So, Joe, you're talking about the multiple Grand Tours. I was behind the scenes texting with Vino, told him that you definitely need to do the Vuelta. I know that Adam Hansen, right, he's got the record for something like 17 or 18 Grand Tours in a row. What are the odds you're gonna be able to do the Vuelta?
they I'm not sure if it was totally jokingly, but seemingly jokingly asked me what I thought about doing the Vuelta when we were at the embassy. Yeah, I wouldn't say it's on my list of I won't be putting my hand up, let's say. Yeah, it actually made me think about that record with Adam Hansen, because actually now I've done 3 Grand Tours in a row, because I Vuelta last year and then Giro and Tour. So I'm 3/20ths of the way there, or however many.
That's great.
To be honest, even this is the first time I've done back to back. I mean, I've done Vuelta Giro a lot of times, but that's not the same, because then you have an off season in the middle. Yeah. It's the first time I've done the Tour, so inevitably it's the first time I've done back-to-back Grand Tours where there's only like 3, 4, 5 weeks between. It's definitely not easy, and if I were to do it again, would I manage it differently? Maybe yes. I would say perhaps after the Giro, I did like an easy week of maybe 14 hours or something, the first week. And then I raced after 2 or 3 weeks, and I didn't want to take like a totally off the bike, because I kind of had this race in mind, even though Occitanie is not particularly important in the grand scheme of things. But if I did it again, I would maybe say that I would prefer to do no races between and have like 5 or 6 days where you don't touch the bike at all. And okay, maybe you don't feel great the first week or 10 days when you get going again. But maybe that's how I would do it the next time.
Try to ride into it a little bit.
Yeah, but then again, like every time's also, every time's different, because like I went to Ossitani and then I got sick after. This was prior to the tour, and I was sure it was COVID, just given like the situation that was happening in Swiss, where like half the peloton was out. I tested every day for like 10 days, always negative. So, but even something like that, it's like you get sick, a week or two before the tour, and I don't think it was really impacting me. But there's always these factors that are sort of like unquantifiable.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, every year's different, and there's so many, it's like as measured as we can be nowadays with all the tools we have around performance, whether it's like power meters, heart rate monitors, heart rate variability trackers. I still think there's an element of like, there's a lot more we don't know than we do know.
Yeah. So I only have like 2 more questions, but will the tour, and then you got your pop quiz, but will the tour kind of like jump in terms of your priority level for future years, or are you going to keep like the Giro? Because I know the Giro's always been like pretty special to you.
Yeah, I would like to do the tour again. Would I want to do Giro Tour again? I don't know. I would do Giro Tour again. I would definitely like to have another crack at the tour. Would I want to focus exclusively on the tour and not do the Giro? I'm not sure, because I don't know. I really love the Giro. It's a race that suits me. And I always seem to kind of go well in May. Again, it's one of those things like, I don't really know why, but it seems to be like my time of the year.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I'd like to do it again. I guess the thing that I maybe noticed most about the tour was within the race, I can't say that I really felt any differently than doing any other Grand Tour. Like, it wasn't in any way significantly different than the Giro or Vuelta. But the one thing that you do realize is that it's the one race in cycling that is bigger than cycling itself, and that there's a core group of cycling fans that watch all the races and follow everything. But it was impressive the number of people that come out of the woodwork, even to the extent of like, my middle school PE teacher was emailing me during the race saying that, a number of the teachers at Taylor Middle School were watching every stage of the Tour de France on TV and were super happy to follow along. And, given like what they were saying about the race, you could tell that like they don't know a lot about cycling, and nor are they like really cycling fans per se, but it's just interesting because it's really an institution in and of itself. And it's cool, I guess, as a rider, it's cool to take part in that, because you can't deny that while the racing may not feel any different per se, like it really is. I mean, the tour is the tour.
So last question before the quiz: who is the unsung hero of the Tour de France? A rider? What rider in the tour was kind of like an unsung hero?
I would say it would be hard for me to pick one, but I would say I would pick one of the guys from Jumbo Visma that was not as totally obvious that they were, maybe like Thies Benoot.
You're right.
Laporte, Van Hooijdonk, guys like that. I mean, okay, like Roglic, Kuss, Kruijswijk, those guys were all like very visible.
Right.
But I mean, they had a really impressive team. And
You definitely
people
see
don't.
those guys at the end, but you don't see those guys for the first 2/3, that are
Yeah,
doing some grunt work.
right. And then like I felt like they really were as a team, they were really impressive. Obviously, like everyone saw Van Aert, and
Yeah.
I mean, he's amazing.
That's why he's not unsung, but
Yeah, it's like he's been sung about a lot.
yeah.
But I would say the rest of the team was, um, from my perspective, they were the strongest team in the race for sure.
Oh yeah. All right. Well, we only have 3 minutes. I want to give you the pop quiz because some people enjoyed that last week. So I've chosen all the correct answers again. Oh, by the way, last week, I think you got credit for getting number 10 correct. Still gave you like a D- on the whole test. Sorry. First question, tubeless or tubular?
Tubular.
That's correct. Wine or cheese?
Wine.
Correct. Nailing it. Bananas or apples?
Bananas.
Yeah, I knew you were going to say bananas. Crosswinds or time trials?
Time trials.
Incorrect. The correct answer was crosswinds. The World Cup or the Super Bowl?
World Cup.
Correct. TikTok or YouTube?
YouTube.
Yeah, correct. Man,
I've actually never been on TikTok.
I haven't either, but it's very popular with the youths. Crosswords or Sudoku?
Crosswords.
Correct. Crushing it. Zwift or Peloton? I don't know if there's
Zwift.
branding issues. Correct. iPhone or
Zwift.
Android?
iPhone.
Correct. COVID or monkeypox?
I'm gonna go with COVID because I currently have COVID and it seems fairly manageable, and I don't know what monkeypox is like.
Yeah, and it seems like it could be nasty. That is correct, Joe. You only got one wrong. That's
It's not bad.
amazing. That's
I'm on good form after the tour.
Hell yeah. Well, again, I'm just super stoked that you took the time to do this. It was a ton of fun. I know it was fun for like me, Gustav, Eric, and Chris, but people really seem to enjoy it in the area. So thanks for taking the time. And it might be fun to do this. I don't know what your schedule's like in the future, but maybe we can get 1 or 2 of these out within the remaining part of the season.
Cool.
Awesome. All right, Joe. Thanks a lot, buddy.